Welcome everybody to our discussion this afternoon about the transformation with a focus on economics and finance. We have a very knowledgeable panel here that I'm going to introduce in a minute. I wanted to just start with the topic of today. We talk about what is sometimes called the great transformation that is perhaps required in the next 10, 15, 20 or 30 years. Interestingly, there's a title of a book that was published in 1994 by Karl Polanyi, The Great Transformation, that talks about the changes that the English society had to undergo in a shift to the market economy. And the question now is whether we are at the same stage or a similar stage in terms of a transformation that is required in the economy and in finance. The title also reminds me about a book by Charles Dickens, The Great Expectations. So perhaps we have great expectations that cannot be fulfilled in the next 10, 15, 20 years. It's about what kind of innovations we need. It's about the change of behavior of humans. So everything will be on or up to discussion in our next 60 minutes. And I go straightforwardly to our panel that is with us today. To my left, Christine Antlanger-Winter. She's country director of Google Austria. She knows the innovation system very well, and she's also an expert in digital solutions in education. Welcome today. Then we have Thomas Arnoldner, Chief Executive Officer of A1 Telekom Austria Group, an expert with a long career in communications, telecommunications. We have Hannah Lux. She's founder and Chief Executive Officer of an establishment called Vollpension.
Establishment. We belong to the establishment.
It's a coffee place to make it more concrete. That brings together generations where people are employed that are usually pensioners and that interact with, of course, customers that are not only pensioners but also young people. And the idea behind it is bringing generations together. And on the far left-hand side for you is Ricardo-José Vybiral. I hope I pronounced it correctly. He is the CEO of KSV 1870. That's the Creditor Protection Unit in Austria that is in charge of insolvency problems and credit rating, credit standings, and so on. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. We have agreed on a starting an initial statement of everybody in 3 to 5 minutes, and I hand over first to my left, if you agree. Christine, please take it from here.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I mean, we would like to discuss, right, what does this great transformation bring and what are the changes, or what do we want to keep from what we learned over the last 6 months, more or less. And I would like to start with an anecdote from my personal life. I'm a mother of 2 sons. They are 5 and 7. So the older one just started school last year. So he's in first grade of primary school. And I was really amazed by the teacher and how she resolved the situation. So I had very good experience with the homeschooling and the school and how the teacher resolved it. And the thing that stood out was not that she used the most fancy technology, but her attitude was just, she knew what she had to focus on and what the children needed, right? They were in the first year of school, so they just needed to have a good structure. They just needed to have a decent amount of tasks that they were able to fulfill per day, not being overwhelmed by too much, that they keep the good spirit towards their school life and their start in school. And she used technology on a very basic level, right? But it really succeeded. So we were sending some emails and some videos. She was not using any video conferencing, but it worked out. And I talked to a lot of other parents. Thomas, I'm sure you had some conversations about that as well. And parents had different experiences, and I'm sure teachers also had different experiences. But the learning I took out of it when it comes to what do we want to keep from this crisis is, and we talk a lot about technology and digitalization, and for sure in my job, right? But it's not the technology itself. It's the attitude that we have. It's the resilience that we have. That something happens that we were not able to foresee, and it for sure brought us into a completely new situation. We could discuss if there is parallels to other crises, but for sure, it's for us. It was something really new for all of us, and she just did it. Very pragmatic, with the right attitude, with this what we call resilience, right? And we've been talking about this resilience even before COVID, but it was this really beautiful example. So I think this is something in the core of it. It's about how we handle it. On the other side, I think we also saw that technology really helped us, right? It was something that kept us connected, that enabled us to handle this crisis in a pretty good way. If we think of this crisis without our technological possibilities, that would have been a completely different situation. So the second learning I think we should take away is that for sure we have to work on the digital skills, of the technology skills for everyone, right? Be it in education, be it in companies, be it for everyone. And on these human skills, as I said, right? Building resilience, being able to adapt to different situations. And in this respect, I think this is something very positive that we should take away. And coming to this point for everyone, I think that's something where this crisis also gave a strong signal. And I think as this came so rapidly and that strong, I think the signal was very, very visible, even if it was there before. And this is that we keep an eye on, that we make it for everyone, that we lower the barriers. And it's great to have that you are here, Hannah, because I think you have this perfect examples. You bring generations together, and that's one aspect. But all this diversity that we have as humans, right? All these different aspects, being young and old, and being rich and poor, and being from different backgrounds. I think this is something that, and I don't know if you share my thoughts, is something that this crisis shows a lot. And I think this needs all of us. And this brings me to the other point of collaboration. I saw great examples of collaboration in this crisis, in this first weeks, months, days, where we just had to find a solution, an immediate solution. And that was really great to see. And one example, which is like from my industry, is, I mean, Apple and Google released an API together. That hasn't happened before. Yeah, and so that's fantastic. And I think this collaboration is something that is really important. And I would like to end with the aspect of our small and medium businesses. I wear the Gieswein shoes today, which is a company from here, from Tirol, from Brixleck. And they're a family-owned business. So they were producing house shoes and blankets out of woolen material over generations. And the new generation that just took over wanted to produce these beautiful sneakers out of the woolen material. And the offline retailers wouldn't want to sell those. They wouldn't believe in the product. They thought this is, well,
this should be produced somewhere in Asia.
No one would buy that, yeah. So they started e-commerce. And they just sold the shoes online in various countries. And when the crisis came, they were, of course, much more sustainable because they had a second channel. They were not completely out of business. They could just use the second channel to keep their business alive. And this is just such a beautiful example, because I do think that when we talk about society overall as well, right, we have to have this view on the small medium business. It's the backbone of a European economy and also for our Austrian economy. And I think there is a lot of opportunity there if we use technology right. What we saw in the crisis And I think it takes all of us, and it takes a really very focused effort to build the skills, to build the knowledge, how this can be used, how the business models do work. So it's not only technological skills, it's even more. And that's my really main thoughts about this crisis and what I think we learn, what I learned about it, what I think is important. And I'm very much looking forward to the discussion and hear from everyone else.
Thanks, Christina. May I just hand over to Thomas?
Thank you, Christina. I couldn't agree more, especially when you talked about the distance learning. I went through exactly the same experience you described. And in essence, it worked well. But it worked well, I think, because there are certain fundamentals, and fundamentals, that's also the topic of this year's forum. Some fundamentals just prevail. And I'm deeply convinced that even in these unprecedented crises, and for us at least in Austria or in Western Europe, this is by far the biggest crisis since World War II. But we should at the same time remain a little bit humble, because if we look at it from a global scale, we have other crises which affect people, in some cases even much more. We have wars, civil unrest, we have nature catastrophes, etc., etc. But some fundamentals prevail, and I'm deeply convinced that we need to make sure that the fundamentals we believe in, we make sure they prevail, such as the belief in human rights, in democracy, in freedom of speech, in the way we treat each other, talking about attitudes, multilateralism. About this one we could probably argue a little bit, yeah. But I'm still here deeply convinced that this has to prevail as well. However, there are for sure significant learnings out of this crisis. The first one for me is that it has been proven to everyone that change is possible. You can change if you have to. And March 16th, at least in Austria, every one of us suddenly had to. In our company, we had to move almost 80% of 8,000 employees into home office from one day to the other. We were well equipped, we have the infrastructure, we had the processes in place, so for us maybe it was a little easier, but we really had concerns, for example, putting 1,300 people in our call center suddenly in their home environment. Would this work from both a technology perspective as well as, of course, from a human interaction perspective? And it proved to be working very well. And if we would have asked people, management as well as employees, as well as unions, I think 2 months earlier, people would have said, no, never ever. Why would you do this? So one of the fundamental learnings is that if there is enough sense of urgency, if there is a reason to act, change is possible. And that's a very optimistic sign actually for us, even especially for us in Europe, where we tend to be a little bit pessimistic, believing that, okay, things, we are so bound to our history, it's so difficult, complex, taking a lot of time to change things. So that's one important learning. Second important learning for me is, as you described it, we have quite a few new tools in our toolbox, especially regarding digitalization. Some of those tools are still a little bit underdeveloped and they need fine-tuning, they need, education, and we need also to be very aware of for which use cases you can use these tools, because as people famously said, if you have a hammer, everything looks a nail, but not everything is a nail, right? And we cannot solve everything now with distance learning or with telemedicine or with working from home, but it's a powerful new tool in the toolbox. But what we need, and I think this is also supporting your point, what we need is the changes in attitude, the education, the implementation of processes. Because we should not only be talking about the tools, but especially about the users. And there is a long way to go thinking about education of teachers, parents, thinking about new ways of leadership we need in the companies, in working from home mode, thinking about changing our health system with more distance, etc., and so forth. Thirdly and finally, for me, to be honest, now the tricky part is coming. Because you started rightfully with talking about transformation, and transformation is easy when the heat in the kettle is really boiling up. But I have a feeling that now the heat is going a little bit back. We are pouring billions of money into the economy to make sure that people are less affected, which I fully support. I have full empathy for that. But at the same time, we have to be careful that we are not disguising issues and problems and challenges, and that we create enough sense of urgency in order to make use of this openness for change. Because the world, from a business perspective, economy perspective, but many other perspectives as well, will for sure look differently after this crisis. I don't think it will have changed fundamentally in terms of the fundaments I've been talking about before, but we will have industries who are prospering, and we will have industries who will still have issues for a long time. And we need, for example, to move people from the ailing industries into the prospering industries, which means we need to have a significant change in the skill sets. And I think these topics need a lot of focus now, and this is where I believe things are becoming tricky now.
That's the uphill battle that we are facing, I guess,
yes.
Because it's getting steeper and steeper, absolutely.
Yes.
Thomas, thanks a lot. Hannah.
I'm curious what's going to happen with you, because at least for me, like, many things have already been mentioned, and I'm not a big fan of saying the same thing twice, but I'll try to add on to what I've already heard. So I think for me, my main 3 learnings would be connection, collaboration, and the power of innovation. To explain it a little bit, what I mean is to the first, connection and how. So first of all, I think Corona really made us see how connected the world is, how this virus is spreading across the world. I think it's so visible, right? And on the other hand, it also showed us how important it is to have human connection. If you just think of the stories where, I don't know, like you went shopping for your elderly neighbors, or in our case with Vollpension, where half of our staff, which are like 50 people, are over 65, most of them living alone, really being isolated in their 35 square meter apartments, and what that is doing to a person. That was quite cruel to see, I would say. And on the other hand, it also gave me a lot of hope, because I feel like right now people have the importance of human connection much more closer with them again. And what does it mean if I'm really sitting at home and not being able to hug my family and to be really close to each other? And for me, it was also surprising. I'm a big fan of, like human touch and human encounters, and I wouldn't describe myself as an expert in digitalization, but to see how technology and digital tools actually really help to keep in touch and stay in touch with each other. It was amazing, and it also worked with the elder generation. So that, I think that's something to keep from this last couple of months. Then the second one, collaboration. I really like the little wordplay that Otto Schama is using when he talks about the importance of a shift in our economic system, when he says we need to shift from ecosystem to an ecosystem. And I really like that, because I think we need to, what Corona also showed us was that it is important, and there is such a power if we start working together. And even with our small little, social startup, we reached out to, first of all, our community. We started a crowdfunding, and we raised the money that we really needed to survive the last couple of months. It worked. We reached out to companies that we've never really been in touch with, because we just thought that maybe we could do something together. And we just started collaborations like that, and a partnership that would probably normally have taken us a year to come to that point within a couple of days. And I think that was amazing to really support each other in these times. And also, like, as a small business to see the level of sticking together in the gastronomy sphere, but also in the startup bubble, and how people and entrepreneurs were supporting each other. I think that was a great learning, and that's definitely something to keep for the future. And the third thing, what you also said, change is possible. And when we have to come up with new solutions, we are able to do so. And we keep talking about climate change and what are we gonna do and what. Let's do it. I mean, we saw that we are capable of, if we are sticking together, all of our different perspectives and smart minds, and we see the urgency of it, we can actually make a difference. And I think that's something we're gonna need, I'm sure we're gonna need in the next couple of years to come, because Corona is nothing against what's actually in front of our door and happening in the world when it comes to climate change and all the problems that are linked to it.
Thanks a lot. I'm sure we'll talk about climate change as well later on a bit, because it's also one of the aspects that transformation plays into. But before that, Ricardo, please.
Thank you. Before COVID, and the challenges are still valid. We have the topic around the digitalization. We have the topic around decarbonization, and we have a huge topic around this inequalities. Yes, also inequalities in homeschooling, because it went sometimes well, but I have seen also examples, personal examples with my kids, where it is a little bit different. Yeah? And it has also to do if kids have access to technology, if they don't have access to technology, and if you have access to technology, do you understand the technology? How do you manage all this technology? So you have all these inequalities. Yes. Also when we talk about tourism, gastronomy. Yes. When we talk about the tourism at the lakes, it's increasing. Yeah. When we talk about the tourism in the cities, 85% minus. Yeah. So we are in a completely different situation, and the inequalities are getting bigger and bigger. So coming back to the digitalization, and we did a survey before COVID. Yeah. And the digital survey said 70% of the Austrian companies, they have no digital agenda. So they have no digital agenda, they're no focused on digitalization. Yeah. And after COVID, we had a second survey, yes, and it was the number one topic. Digitalization is the number one topic for the companies in Austria. And the good thing that we had in the past years, and what we have seen, is that the financial structure of the companies in Austria, they got stronger and stronger in the past 10 years. So after the last crisis, the financial crisis, 2007, yes, what we have seen year by year, so the last 3 to 4 years, we have seen that the equity quote went up 2% every year. So we have in Austria in total we have 600,000 companies, and we have 280,000 registered companies. And we see when we look into the figures that these registered companies, they have a strong financial structure, and this strong financial structure is so important now because it helps, yes, to drive this transformation, and it helps also in this really tough situation when you lose revenue, because when you're a startup, yes, and you're losing revenue, you're in deep shit, yeah? I know, yeah? It's not easy, yeah? Because you have nothing, yes? What can you do? Yes, you can rethink your business model. That is easy to say, yes? But you cannot rethink every business model, yes? That's a little bit an illusion, yes? That we can rethink every business model, yeah? Sometimes, yes, we have seen it. We have seen that we have, I don't like the word with the crisis. We have winners in the crisis. Yes, we have the cloud computing, we have the delivery services, they went up in all the revenues, yeah. So we can see that. And this is around the topic digitalization is driving us into a new direction. The key question is still, how sustainable is this? Yes? Will it change when the crisis is over? Will it change that, we had the discussion on Monday, Thomas, yeah? Will it change that business flights will be reduced in 2 or 3 years? Yes, a lot of people are saying, or airline experts are saying, in 3 years we're back. Maybe it's only the travel, the private people that are traveling around the world, not the business people. Yes, maybe. Then we see another topic. This is the topic around the decarbonization. And what we see in the companies that are members of our organization, they are accessing more and more local credit ratings. So it was a complete change from international credit ratings to local credit ratings. So we are driving regionalization. Also, the key question is, will it be sustainable? So will it be in 2 or 3 years still that we focus on our local country, that we use local vendors? Or will it change completely when the cost pressure is getting higher? And we are back moving, buying in Asia or in other regions. This is also. And the third topic, I think it would be worth to address, is all this topic around inequalities. It's education, access to education. Yes, do I really get access to education? Do I have the possibility to learn? Yes. So yes, COVID is changing a lot. And what we have now to do is to take all these learnings and also transform it into opportunities. Yeah? And all the bad stuff, let it back. So
that sounds like a good plan. Now we have to discuss how we can implement the plan. Thanks a lot for a first very interesting round. I think we agree we have a lively discussion, so we don't have to go in order. So whenever you want to say something, just jump in. I want to start with an observation. So all of you have been quite optimistic, and I'm very sympathetic to that view. On the other hand, of course, there are things that are not so optimistic in my view. For instance, collaboration came up. Yeah, it worked very well on the small scale, I guess, in many countries. On the international scale, even at the European scale, it was not very good. And now we have some transformational issues like digitalization, where we probably don't need that much collaboration worldwide. For the environment, climate change, it's very important to have worldwide cooperation. So, and the second thing probably that we can discuss as well is, are people really prepared? People, yeah, they changed their behavior, but they were forced to change their behavior. Do we need to force them to change their behavior, or do you think that's possible to change the mindset so that people, at least the majority, will want to change the behavior to make this transformation happen? I don't know who wants to take that up. Ricardo and then
Thomas, you first, please.
On your second question, I think it's always a combination of push and pull factors, right? I mean, we see that every day in our business. Convenience beats just almost everything. Just think about discussions we have about privacy, where people, if you ask them, expect very high standards, and then look what they have on their phones in terms of apps and privacy. And that's for me just one of the key examples that convenience beats a lot of things. So all the solutions we have to think about on the small scale, such as in the education system or health system, we have to make them user-friendly so that they're adopted. We have to make having a green behavior being user-friendly. It's very difficult to force people. Hence, there is an element of pushing where regulation comes in, but we have to use this, I think, with a very sensitive amount. And we have to create, as I said this earlier in my introductory statement, we have to create a sense of urgency. And in March, we had a huge amount of sense of urgency. We had the right tone from the top. We know this from the businesses, how important that is. We see it in politics, how important it is that people get some guidance in order to have this need for transformation created. I think, and this has to be a collaborative effort now between policymakers, between experts, between people from the businesses, in order to find this right balance between getting back to the old normal and having this transformation which we need in many of the instances we have been talking about. Maybe one word regarding multilateralism and international collaboration. In all this mess we have been in and we are in, one positive thing really strikes out for me on top of what has been said before, which is the use of evidence or data or facts in fighting this crisis. I don't remember, at least in shorter time of history or my lifetime, that we ever had such a prominent policy topic where the time between policy decision and consequences was so short. We could see it in the infection rates. You took the wrong decision, 2-3 weeks later you had the result. And this was really differing good leadership from bad leadership. And this is something I think we have to keep somehow. And it was also very fascinating to see how evidence-based politics played into this. And hopefully this is an opportunity, for example, also for fighting climate change. And we might see some consequences of this on November 3rd, I think it is, in the US.
Yeah, that will be very interesting.
We might see. Yeah?
At least on the national level, it will be important.
I pick up this topic around leadership. I think we have we have to change our style of leadership and how to manage also companies. Yeah? We are coming from pre-COVID, where managers tried to have control over employees, yes, or if you say it a little bit, human resources often you hear, yes. So, and I think we have to think about a different approach. We talk about talent, yes. We talk about it's no longer to control people if they're coming at 8 and leaving the company at 5, 6, 7 p.m. Yeah? It's about talking about a more value approach, yeah? Value-orientated approach. We have to talk more about what is the vision, what is the mission, because we're now really in troubles because we don't know how to manage home office. We all think we can cool and good manage home office, and every say 60-70% of our people say great. Home office is great, yes. But home office is also you're losing to your talent also a certain connection, because only doing it via technology is okay, it is important, it can help, but the physical, yes, the personal relationships are so important that you have that you can build an identity with your people. Yeah? And I think
also inequalities matter here, of course. There's
Absolutely.
This very nice topic in The Economist. I think there was a story about that there's 2 types of workers now. The slackers that actually lean back and nobody actually realizes that they lean back, and the staccanovites, those that work very hard actually. And people, of course, at a certain stage within companies will actually address these issues. And if they are present, you have ways to deal with that. If they're not present, it's much more difficult. Sorry, I was interrupting.
No, but that's a good point, yes. And we have to transform everything we did in the past, and we have to do it a little bit more different, and we have to learn every day. So we have to learn from each other to get the insights and say what is the right model, yes, to manage all these changes that we face at the moment, and how can we get through the crisis? How can we, but not only the crisis, what is after the crisis, yes? Because it's also important that we not only think at what is happening now. So how can we invest in the future? How can we work on sustainability? How can we work on all these goals and all this pressure we have? Yeah?
On the remote work, that's something I'm very interested in. I mean, it's the topic of a lot of discussions I at least had over the last weeks. Obviously, it's a very important topic. And I mean, we have now 6 months, right, with learnings, experiences. And I think, or at least I think it will never be as it was before. So probably more flexible. So we will have to deal with this on a longer term. And I think it's important that we keep open, and that we not it's not the time to take a final decision if it works or not. And it's not the time to take a final decision defining this is exactly the rule, how it works. We do this now for 6 months. And I think there has been phases in this 6 months, right? The first weeks was like, yes, we can do this, right? And everyone is super energized, and we will find solutions to transform what we did in real life to virtual, and this is great, and we keep singing songs together, whatever everyone did, right? And then, as I said before, right, in this psychological curve, then you go into the valley of disillusionment, where you like feel like, oh my God, this is like, this drains all my energy. I'm sitting in front of this video screen all the time, and all this uncertainty that everyone had to deal with, the managers as well as the teams themselves, right? What's with my kids, what's with my parents, with whoever, right? With your loved ones and with yourself. And I think now I feel like this is about, we're going out of this phase where we're trying to transform the real life things that we did before, like having meetings, having events, and find something that we translated. But we should take a step back and really think of what are the needs right now. And this comes back to leadership, right? You have to think about what is my team in this really specific situation, and every team is in another situation. First, you have all these individual needs. You have all these individual backgrounds of every employee, right? They have young kids, no kids. They live out of the city, in the city, whatever it is. And to build something new, I think it's not that translation anymore. And I think we have to keep this openness, which I don't think it's a time for a conclusion yet. I think the only conclusion, at least that I take for myself, is some things worked very good until now, even better maybe than in real life. I heard a lot of people saying some working meetings were much more efficient over VC than in real life, and the outcome was really good. And other things just don't work that well. And then there is a lot of challenges. And in Google, for example, the topic of well-being and mental health in this period plays a very important role, and this is not always that visible. So it's very interesting, I would say. And my important note that I would like to take is, I think it's too early to make assumptions, but we should keep open to learn.
No, I fully agree. Yes, my key question is: are we getting, with all the technology we have, and technology is great, yes, I believe in technology and it's good, but are we getting more and more disconnected? And not only on company level, yes? When we see, you mentioned it before, when we look at the European Union, yeah, we're in a deep crisis with the European Union, because every country is really self-interested. Yeah? They're only looking at their own topics, yes? And to bring us out of this crisis, needs collaboration, not only on local level. It needs collaboration on European level. It needs collaboration on global level. Otherwise, yes, with all the populism and all what is driving at or what we hear every day, yes, through media, it's horrible, yes, because we're not getting in the mood, yeah, to solve the problems we really have, or we have to solve, yes. And this is strange to say, but my feeling is we're getting more disconnected with all the technology we have today. And it has not with the technology to do. Yeah?
And if I may add something to that, it's also excluding people, right? So the gap between the rich and the poor is becoming bigger and bigger, which is leading to more and more polarization, and is becoming an increasing problem. And I think that's also something like what we are talking here, like many people don't have a voice in that, right? Or they feel, or they don't even only feel, but they are actually left out of the whole discourse. And I think that's also something we need to come up with solutions, how to include people and give them a voice, really understand the daily realities of people in Europe and around the world. And I feel like somehow we are disconnected very often in politics, but also in organizations, from those real lives that are happening every day.
I completely see those 2 points. I just would like to add this disconnection part a bit into perspective. Because, and I think we talked about that before, and I heard you saying that as well. I just would like to give this a voice as well. What if we hadn't had this technology, right? So, but there is a risk of, it could seem like that everything's fine and we're just connected through technology and everything's the same. And it's not. But we were able to remain a connection level on a very high level. But there is challenges for sure, and it's not everything is like perfectly fine. And I agree. And even with Google never was always convinced that 100% remote work is not the best solution. So it is something we have to closely look at.
I think the technology is key and it's necessary.
Yeah.
So that's important. But there are other layers that we have to be very careful. And these are all these trends around this populism, nationalism, and we have to try to fight against it. Yeah? Technology can help us to fight against it.
That's exactly the point I wanted to make. I think a mistake in the conversations I'm having a lot these days is that people tend to confuse the tool with the solution. And for me, technology, as I said earlier, is an extremely powerful tool. And by the way, there are more tools out there. Remote working is not only about video conferencing. There is lots of tools available which we are not yet using in order to support creative processes, for example. But coming back to the example of the hammer, right? We had a hammer. We had lots of nails now. But not every problem we need to solve is a nail. And a hammer can be a useful tool, it can be a useless tool, it can even be a weapon. And I think we really have to differentiate between those two layers. We need more tools, we need to spread them in a fair way, we need to make them available to as many people as possible, but we should not believe that just because they are available, it's black and white and we solve all the problems. It comes back to things like knowing how to use them, things like making them, as I said earlier, available to everyone. It's about education, it's about leadership styles. So we should not, we should neither, let's say, praise technology too much because it's a tool, it's not solving everything, but at the same time we shouldn't be, and this is a bit a European or Central European phenomenon I often see, we also shouldn't blame technology for everything which is happening. If you don't want to talk to people, you find plenty of ways. This time it's Corona. Other times is you just don't call each other or you don't greet each other on the street. So, we shouldn't use technology as an excuse for everything.
No, of course, this is one of the things I wanted to talk about a bit because I think it's very important how to get everybody along, actually. And technology is, of course, a tool that helps us. On the other hand, it's clearly not sufficient to take...
I think it needs to be demystified a little bit.
Yeah. I would like to add a point, because that is something we said we want to find also some kind of solution level, right? Or how can we bring this down to earth? We agreed on that we need to bring it to everyone. And I started thinking a lot about this female factor discussion, right? I have my personal story with it. I have a technical degree, and I had no technical background before I started this university. And I for sure would have never decided for computer science back then, late 90s. But there was the study of media engineering and media design, which me as a creative person found that interesting. And I found specifically the technological part around it interesting because that was new to me. So, and you could discuss this in the female context, but I think you could discuss this in an even broader context, because it's really about getting rid of these barriers that people are just not in touch with this. And I don't know what your experience is with older people, and probably it's not always a question of age. That's at least my personal experience. But we should find, I think, a way to bring this digital skills and all the other skills, but let's keep on the technology level, to these people so that they don't have this fear of diving into it and getting in touch with it and getting more knowledge, because it's an easy thing. And I think the products themselves, the apps, they got so convenient. Almost everyone is able to use them. But the other thing is to have a broader knowledge around it and being able to evaluate different options about data and everything else. And this is where I think we should work closer to the people where they are, like in the female space, that we create university studies that combine medicine with tech or whatever it is, right? Not just pure tech, and trying to get other people that are not attracted to tech to somehow bring them to be attracted to tech. I mean, that's maybe not the most effective lever. And that's just my thinking around coming from this angle, that maybe there's something in it that we can use to bring it to a broader scale and to bring it to more diverse perspectives, diverse people.
But isn't it inherent to a certain extent, so I'm not playing the devil's advocate, inherent to a certain extent that technology favors those who are more mobile, more flexible? There's this nice analogy that I sometimes use, and that describes a bit those two groups that we see nowadays being established in almost all countries. The somewheres, those who actually are somewhere at the place, they cannot move very easily, they probably don't have the education to go in another country, and they lose out nowadays in nowadays economy. And the anywheres, those who study somewhere, they go somewhere else, they can work at any place. It doesn't necessarily have to do with education alone. It also has to do, of course, with attitude, because there's, of course, lots of workers from Asia that go to whatever the Arabic countries and earn more money than at home. So, but this distinction between somewhere, anywhere, distinction between rural areas and the cities, that I think this polarization has been aggravated over the last couple of years or decades. Is it technology, or is it just that, is it globalization, is it something else that's driving that? Thomas?
I think the key word you mentioned here is attitude, and there for sure is other factors such as income you mentioned, such as availability of infrastructure. But for me, these are not the main barriers. The main thing is, and the example of the Far East, or if I look into the environmental countries we are in, there's different levels of attitude, because there's different levels of willingness to change, or sometimes also need to change. Because if you live, let's say, in a very comfortable environment, you probably don't embrace these new things with the same extent as if you really see, the single chance in changing your personal life. Yeah? And this is why I meant that now the tricky part in the transformation comes, because especially policymakers, including but also ourselves, we need to find the right balance between somehow, let's say, soothing people or making them, less feel less uncertain, insecure, but at the same time prevailing and pushing this sense of urgency in order to get the transformation done. And this is then becoming relevant when we look a lot in many of those concrete measures. For example, for how long should we have these state aid programs running? What are the criteria? Should people be required to do education when they are on short-term work? Right? How do we inject? You were talking about equity. Yeah? How do we change attitude of people with money or institutions with money in order to inject more equity into our economy? All these kind of questions, which are now becoming, I think, really hot. After, probably the most tricky part of the pandemic crisis has been managed, I think this part is becoming more difficult.
I think it's difficult to say and I know you don't mean it like that, but you talked about it's very much about attitude that people are having. I see that many people are really scared about technology because it's just so unknown and it's totally out of my comfort zone. So I think it's more than attitude.
It drives me out of my work, because I'm not going to manage the next 10 years or whatever.
For example, I give you an example. Yeah, when we started to do our whole how do you say it? I'm missing a word. Dienstplan. Give me the word. Yes, schedules, exactly. Online. Big thing when you have 50 people over 65 not being used to check in online with an app, right? And there was so much resistance just to push a button. Like, it's not difficult, you know. But what we heard so many times, like, but then the Americans have my data, right? And like, I couldn't believe it. Like, what, are you really thinking that? Like, what is going on, you know? So, but people are really afraid. And so I think it's about education, and it's about, and I would be interested, like, what your thoughts are about that. You said we need to go to the people, and we need to go where those people are, and you know, start living in their bubbles and educate them.
I think it's so valuable, your social startup, and I also had a question to you, but I think we really together, right? I mean, it's not one of us who could resolve it. We try hard. We started a summer academy with free trainings for everyone, right? We have trainings from very basic digital skills or just general skills to very sophisticated. We try to bring it out there. We still have to do better. We have to bring the word out, right? And make it available to the people. So I think we need collaboration. I thought about this before, right? Because you have access to people that sometimes are confronted with barriers because of their fears, because of what's out there, and I think that's very important. And on the other hand, I was interested what your experience was as soon as you somehow led them to being better, that they were able to use it, right? So they did their first experiences. Did you feel that there was a development for these people, right?
Yes, they got really excited. I think it offers, you know, a bigger space. Like, you have more space of kind of, I don't know, sharing your thoughts, being in touch with each other, becoming creative. I think it's just, if you use technology right, it gives you more space to kind of step up for yourself and bring out, you know, whatever has to be brought out of yourself.
Because
so, it's empowerment in the end.
Yeah, exactly. And my thoughts were really, besides all the government measures that the government has to take, but what about role modeling more? Praising the really good examples, praising the grandmothers and grandfathers and the retired people that work in your Vollpension, and make them show their cooking recipes for their cakes, I don't know, on YouTube, for example, or whatever, and bringing the word out there, showing our great companies that already adapted to e-commerce in Austria, the small medium business, the Gieswans out there, and everyone else, and just creating a dynamic from this angle as well. And I think we have to do it from every angle. It's just, there's not one way. It has to be a common approach. And maybe this sounds a bit optimistic. It's really hard. It's not easy. But that's a lot. I do think a lot about what about the role modeling, also with the digitization, with the skills, with the opportunities. Having an ability, as I said before, to do an evaluation instead of just being feared out and, oh, this is something I don't know and I'm scared and I better not do it because it could be that something bad happens. So I think that's our responsibility from the side of where we have so much more knowledge from being the Anywheres. And one other thought that I had is sometimes it's when we talk about convenience, right? And when do you start trying new things out? And in most of the cases, it's trying new things out. And if the need is strong enough, right? If there's something that you really want to have, then you would probably do it. I mean, from my personal surrounding, our grandparents, they want to see the pictures of their grandchildren. So they have their smartphones ready and they do things that I'm not even aware of that you can do it. Sometimes, at least their usage time is even higher than mine. So it's interesting and it has so many different layers.
There was a sense of urgency, yeah. Ricardo, you wanted to say something, please.
Yes, one point. I think I fully agree. So I fully agree. I'm a technology fan, yes. Yeah. I love to use technology. I love to use it to communicate with people, to connect with people, but it's not everything. But we have to work also on if we want to change the this societal transformation we are talking, yes, if we want to drive this change, then we have also to work on the basics. And the basics are not only technology skills, they are also financial skills. We have per year in Austria 10,000 people that are getting in bankruptcy. Yeah? They are in insolvency, yes, and they have no clue, yes, how to issue a credit. Yes, they have no clue when they go to a bank or insurance what they sign. Yes, and when I go to schools, and I know that you are doing the same, Thomas. Yeah? When I go to schools, then I have sometimes teachers telling me after the session, and we're doing basic financial education, they are telling me, that's very complicated. Fuck, yeah, wow, no, so complicated, I wasn't aware of it. Yeah, so, and that's a key. We have to look more, we have teachers, yeah? And we have to teach the teachers. We have to empower them. Yes, we have a lot of teachers. Yes, they are far away to train our kids. Yeah? To be very honest, we have very good teachers. They are doing everything, but we have also the other part, and we have to work strong on it.
Can I bring in one aspect, this lifelong learning attitude again, right? And it's not about. I would not bring it into the schools and the teachers, but on a general level. For sure, our education system is not made for lifelong learning. It's made for exams, right? So if you have an exam and then everything's good and
good and gone.
Good and gone.
If it was ever there.
Do you agree? I mean, it's just I wanted to bring it up, right? I mean, I do think it's really important, and if you play it well, it's something very positive, because if you keep being interested, it's something very human. You want to learn new things, but it seems to be a really hard challenge for our society to really bring this in and make it natural. But I think it's very important.
It brings us back to the attitudes issue.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a personality characteristic, whether you stay curious or not so much when you grow older, but it's also attitude, whether I really want to do that, actually. And of course we have these examples, everybody knows these examples of employees at an age of 45 or 50, they say, I'm going to retire soon, so I don't have to learn this new stuff. And of course, nowadays in 15 or 20 years, lots of things change. And if you don't learn the new stuff, it's important.
But
it's
I agree.
difficult.
It's some. You have a lot of people. You have not a lot of people, but you have people that don't love they don't like to have a life learning approach. Yes, they want to be very relaxed, more comfortable, everything, yes, and sometimes they don't like facts. There was one interesting point you mentioned, evidence and fact-based. We have to fight, yes, that for the facts and evidence, because when we bring it to the people and make it clear what are the real facts, what is the evidence behind, then the people understand why we are doing all this around environmental stuff, digitalization, and so on and so forth.
No, agreeing on the facts is, I think, an important issue. I want to come back to one thing you said, Christina, that I think is very important. Given that we have, I think in most countries, record levels, not now at the moment, but in general, record levels of distrust into politics and the capacity of politics to solve problems, I think it will be very important that companies, the civil society, that non-political players will actually supports this transformation. Otherwise, I think it would not work. And that could be something different to transformations that we observed, whatever, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or even longer ago, that the civil society, that everybody must have a say, which is of course difficult because we probably don't agree on the facts sometimes. And agreeing on the facts and having facts that everybody believes in and trusts in will probably be the basis. I don't know whether you agree, but it's one of the issues I'm quite convinced of.
For us it's key, yes, since 150 years that we use facts, yeah. Otherwise we are not the right organization. Yes. So we're fact-based, we have experts, and what we are trying to do, and I think that's important, is to bring these facts to bring it to the people, and this bringing to the people, it's not easy.
No, it's
you
not
have
easy.
also to manage, yes, this bringing to the people the right information, the facts, to reflect the facts, And that's a challenge. Yeah?
And it seems to be even not very human. If I think about Kahneman and what they researched around, right? The human decision making, just by nature, is not so much based on facts, and sometimes it's pretty far
and
away.
I think there is one more complication we have to deal with these days. There is no agreement on what the facts really are. There is different realities people live in. I mean, just look at what is happening in the States. I mean, if you look at different media outlets, you have the feeling people live in completely different worlds. Look at these anti-corona demonstrations, which we have out in the street these days. Look at what we are experiencing regarding 5G deployments. It's absurd when you look at the fact, but the realities, those perceived realities are there, and there's quite significant groups of people who seem to live on a completely different base of facts, and that's a different planet. Yeah. I know you guys are dealing a lot with it, but that's one of the key challenges going forward, I think. Yeah.
That's something around COVID you could see a lot, and also in our case, I just maybe bring the example because it really fits now. We were really trying hard when the crisis hit that really authoritative news content was visible around Corona, and we were really heavily also deleting misinformation, and we were collaborating with the governments, with the local governments, to have really the right content and the right numbers visible, right? If you searched for coronavirus on YouTube, you always got an info box underneath the video that really brought you directly to the social ministry so that you really have the right content. It's just a very small example, but the need for that was also so visible when the crisis came. And this is, I think, chance for these learnings out of this crisis, that some things got so visible, and it needs this collaboration.
But it's a very good example, because I think at the moment the people, and we're in a phase where orientation is so important. Yes, orientation for companies, for every person is orientation, and we have to be very careful that not people that cry louder than others, yes, and maybe not based on facts, yes, is driving people into a wrong direction, and we're having this. Yeah, since years, decades.
And linking back to what you said before, talking about it's not only, I think you said, it's not only politics that are in charge, right? My understanding of politics, it's more a governance understanding, right? Where corporations, civil society, startups, and politics in the sense of parties and parliament are equally responsible for shaping the world, and having a responsibility. And I think that's something that we all agree, is that corporates and the economy is having an equal responsibility as our politicians out there, right? And what I observe right now is, like, we're all looking at what our politicians and political leaders are telling us what's the next step to be doing, but it's in our hands as well, right? So
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Probably time flies. I guess we should come to a closing round. Probably discuss a bit in this closing round, if I may ask you about your opinion on how well prepared are we in the Austria, Europe for this transformation compared to others. I mean, this is something that we haven't discussed now. We have discussed a bit on the global level, but do you think that Austria, Europe is in an advantageous position, or what are the threats to this position in terms of this transformation that we are facing in the next years or years to come? I don't know who wants to start. So let's do it. Let's do it.
Ladies
first. Let's do it in reverse order now. Reverse order now, Ricardo. You're
please, Ricardo.
No, but if you want to start, please.
Please.
Christina has the last word, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. I think yes, we are well prepared in terms of when we look on the company side. Yes, in terms of financial structure. So the company structure in Austria is a strong one, but we have to be very focused on how we drive future investments. So the companies in the past, in the last 10 years, when we talk also about digitalization in Austria was more cost and process driven, not driven developing new business models, new revenue streams, new approaches, new startups. Yes, it was also not. We are always telling we have a good startup ecosystem. It could be better. Yeah? It could be much better when you look at Stanford and other places. Yes, they have really strong ecosystems. Yes, and it's different. Yes, and they have also this mindset. Okay, you can fail. Yes, the second chance and all this stuff. So we have to change our mindset in certain topics, like also the second chance. It's okay when you go in insolvency because it has nothing to do with your personal management skills. It's a crisis. Yes, it's an external crisis. So yes, we are well prepared, but we have to take the chance and to do it.
Thanks. Hannah.
I'm laughing because you're trying to make me feel better. I like that.
That's my job.
No, what came up for me was the word privilege. I think we are in a very privileged situation here in Europe. We have a lot of wealth. We have a really great social system. We are quite well educated. And yes, of course, everything could be better. And I think it is important for us to be aware of that privilege and act out of it, right? And stop thinking only about ourselves. And again, start collaborating, reaching out, looking at less privileged people, situations, and start working together. Yes.
I think in sense of preparedness overall was very high. I mean, if you look at the health system, probably one of the best in the world, very well prepared. If you look at the financial structure of our enterprises, as Ricardo pointed out, very good situation when we entered the crisis. If you look at fiscal firepower and the ability to provide state aid, very good preparedness. If you look at the education system with some challenges, but overall, I think we managed quite well. We had some level of digitalization. We had, we managed it. Yeah? Willingness to act in terms of policymaker, government, I think we can. It could have been much worse. Yeah? A great job, and I really don't envy anyone taking decisions now in handling this crisis, especially on a government level. Yeah? A huge amount of wealth, but all this is coming with a caveat as well, because this cushion we are placed on, right, reduces the sense of urgency or the reason to act. And if you compare how the states, for example, went through crisis in the past, it's obvious that the crisis hit them, and this crisis also hit them much harder. They put people immediately into unemployment. They leave lots of the pain and the responsibility to the individuals rather than to the social system, which I don't find also a good approach, because I think we also have to bear in mind that we're talking about human lives which are tremendously affected. But at the same time, by doing this, they have a certain strength, because these people who are immediately put into unemployment, they have a much higher willingness to take on new jobs in new industries, right? So this is making transformation easier, and it's supporting transformation. Is that good or bad? It's very difficult to judge, having in mind what we just have been talking about, social security, and talking about individual human lives. But going forward, that will be the key challenge, to find here the right balance. And from the KPIs, we are well prepared. From the attitude and the willingness to accept that we need this transformation, I have more concerns. And this is why we need, and I think you said this earlier, we should work on having this common approach, a common platform, on role models, where we as an, let's say, ecosystem together, we support this willingness to change going forward?
Yeah, I would say I'm fundamentally optimistic about the future, but it will not be easy to get there. And my main point is I think we should really invest in the skills for the future for everyone, knowing how hard this is. And on the other side, I see there's a lot of things there. We as humans, we have these capabilities to do it. We can change, right? What you said in the beginning. We just have to do it. So it sounds easy. It's not so easy. So I think if we focus on the right things, then we are well prepared. But as I said, sounds easy. It's not so easy, maybe.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for a very lively discussion. We solved today the problem of the great transformation. Thanks. No, I'm kidding, of course.
You're the real optimist here.
Tomorrow we take on world peace. That's the next problem that we solve. No, but I think there were three, for me at least, there were three ingredients that came up and again. One was innovation, innovative potential that we have to keep and raise. And not mistaking tools for solutions. That's, I think, something we agreed on. Cooperation, collaboration, that's something we learned, I guess, during the COVID crisis, and we have to take it on a higher level. That's one of the ingredients that we need for the transformation. And the attitude, the willingness of people, the sense of urgency. And those three things together will probably help us to get through the transformation that we are awaiting. It's probably a great transformation. That's the greatest transformation ever. I don't think so. So we always have the sense of here and now, that here and now is the most important. In the end, looking back, I guess there were great transformations in the history that also were challenging people. On a positive note, I think everybody agreed that the COVID crisis showed that change is possible, and that's something that I think should put us in a positive mood, that we can also take up stronger challenges as a society and as human mankind. Thanks a lot for the discussion. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching, and thanks to your forum Alpbach for having this discussion. I wish you a nice afternoon.